Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Karaps Paduano of the Abang Lingkod Party List for his interpellation.
The Abang Lingkod Party List, Congressman Joseph Stephen Karaps S. Paduano is therefore recognized, and we take notice of the sudden change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please
You are
proceed.
now satisfied with what I look, Mr. Speaker? Anyway, again, will the good sponsor will yield to some questions?
Mr. Speaker, with this beautiful red tie in place, with my pleasure, Mr. Speaker.
Takot ka sa akin. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, before I proceed with a few questions, let me manifest and read my manifestation with regards to the budget of the Department of Agriculture, particularly the budget for Philippine Coconut Authority and, of course, the sugar bowl of the country, which is my province, Negros Occidental, DSRA, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, let me manifest my full and resounding support for the proposed budget of the Department of Agriculture, especially on the budget of the Philippine Coconut Authority. The coconut industry has been cornerstone of our agriculture sector for generations. The country's coconut plantations cover 3.6 million hectares of land across 70 provinces, equivalent to 26% of our total agricultural lands. With 340 million coconut trees that can produce an annual rate of 14 to 15 billion nuts a year, coconut has remained one of our major export products, contributing to 1.6 billion US dollars in export revenues annually. In turn, this helps the 25 million Filipinos who depend on coconuts as their primary source of living. However, in recent years, our coconut industry has been suffering a constant decline, mainly due to aging number of coconut trees in some regions, a series of environmental hazards affecting the country, infestations of pests and disease, and the fact that the last massive coconut planting program was conducted 15 years ago. This resulted in the Philippines losing its dominant position to Indonesia as the global leader in coconut production. In 2021, our ASEAN neighbor managed to produce 17.16 million metric tons of output compared to our 14.72 million. India is also catching up as the third largest coconut producer with 14.30 million metric tons of coconut output. In light of this, the Philippine Coconut Authority, headed by Administrator Bernie Cruz, has formulated 4 major strategies to reinvigorate the Philippine coconut industry. This includes, number 1, increasing coconut productivity through massive coconut planting and replanting using hybrid varieties. Number 2, intensifying coconut farm diversification through partnership and collaborative undertakings with government agencies, SCUs, LGUs, and the private sector. Number 3, enhancing coconut processing through the establishment of more village-level coconut processing centers around major coconut production areas. And number 4, utilizing new coconut technologies by upgrading existing technology and processing centers and laboratories of PSA and establishing coconut technology and improvement hubs. However, this will all be for naught if we cannot allocate a sufficient budget for the realization of these strategies. For 2024, the PCA submitted a proposed budget of about 10 billion to develop the competitiveness and sustainability of the coconut industry and help smallholder coconut farmers increase their productivity and income. Unfortunately, the budget allocated for PCA for fiscal year 2024 is only 1.81 billion out of the 10 billion original proposed budget, which represents merely 2% of the total budget given to the tax agencies and corporations of the Department of Agriculture. In his message to the PCA 50th founding anniversary, President BBM has stated that there is no reason why Philippines should not be the biggest coconut exporter in the world. Thus, to regain our status as the top coconut producing country in the world, we must intensify our efforts to revitalize our coconut industry by providing the necessary funds. Therefore, I urge the House leadership and our distinguished colleagues to reconsider the budget allocation for the PCA. We cannot understate the importance of coconut industry in our economy, let alone its deep connection to our heritage and culture. As such, this representation is earnestly hoping that in the proper time, we will increase the budget allocation of PCA and, if possible, restore their original budget proposal. Now, let me proceed, Mr. Speaker, with regards to some questions. First, as I have heard during the interpellation of the good Congressman Raul Manuel, you have requested, and it was granted by the DBM, your 50 million confidential fund.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
And that 50 million will contribute to curb problems of smuggling, price manipulation, especially dun sa rice, onions, and of course, sugar. Tama po ba?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, anyway, I will just, Mr. Speaker, with regards to the confidential fund, ito ba po, first time na request ng DA o previous years may mga budget na kayo sa confidential fund?
Mr. Speaker, there was a confidential fund when it was Secretary Dar, but this is the first time in this administration.
In this administration, but last year's budget,
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Last year's budget, 0 for confidential fund, and this is the only year that we...
0. Anyway, let us see. After year-end of 2024, if this 50 million will really help to curb smuggling and price manipulation in our country. Anyway, let me proceed, Mr. Speaker, with regards to the issue about that was tackled during the several hearings since February about the issue of price manipulation, importation, and hoarding with regards to onions. During the recent or last hearing, that was September 5, investigation of the House on the possible hoarding of onion and other agricultural commodities, it was found that numerous cold storage warehouses that currently store onions are not officially accredited by the Bureau of Plant Industries despite the issuance of the Administrative Circular Number 1 Series of 2021. The said circular mandates the accreditation of CWS that stock agricultural and fisheries products. This representation during the last September 5 hearing surmised that the problem on hoarding may be attributed to the broad discretion of CSW owners and traders as to when to release their stocks, effectively impeding the market supply and manipulating market prices. The committee members likewise noted that BPI, being the regulatory body tasked to accredit CSWS, should also regulate the release of stocks. And, Mr. Speaker, during the last hearing, that was September 5, the Committee on Agriculture directed the Bureau of Plant and Industries to issue, or to make, or to draft a guidelines with regards to compulsory release of stocks in the CWS. Now, they were directed and directed also to submit such guidelines to this representation, of course, to the Committee on Agriculture. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this representation has only received a copy of the draft guidelines just this morning without the guidelines being directed to the BPI with regards to guidelines or amendments to the guidelines of the importation. Now, as I have read the guidelines that was drafted by BPI, Mr. Speaker, dito po sa guidelines, the BPI will only issue a compulsory release of stocks if, number one, prima facie evidence of hoarding when a trader, distributor, storage facility, minimal processing facility, or primary producer has stocks of any basic or prime agri-fishery commodity 50% higher than that the usual inventory unreasonably limits. Number two, prima facie evidence of profiteering whenever basic necessity or prime commodity being sold, as no price tag is misrepresented as to its weight or measurement is adulterated or diluted. And letter D, or whenever a person raises the price of any basic or prime agri-fishery commodity being sold or offered to sell to the general public by more than 10% of its price in the immediately preceding month. Now, will the good sponsor confirm that this is part of the draft guidelines? Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, there's actually a new draft, a compulsory release of basic and prime agri-fisheries commodities. The Department Circular has been drafted to operationalize the provisions of the Price Act, which you have mentioned in toto, which gives the DA ancillary powers. Again, I repeat, which will give the DA ancillary powers as may be needed to combat illegal acts of price manipulation. This draft is still subject to the valuable comments of the regulatory agencies such as BAI and NMIS, and they will report their comments this week, I am assured, and we will provide you the comments of this, and we will have to undergo the regulatory impact assessment as provided in existing rules, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
In addition, Mr. Speaker, we can also use, as what he has mentioned, the 50 million peso confidential funds to actually help in fighting and combating price manipulators and such, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for that answer. But my question is, if, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, if we follow the guideline, then is it correct to say that BPI can only step in and compel the trader, CSW, owners to release their stocks after the DA or the BPI, for that matter, had already detected prima facie evidence of hoarding.
Mr. Speaker, that is true that the BPI cannot compel the private sector to release the supply before, but with this compulsory release of basic and prime agri-fisheries commodities, with that assessment, provided as existing rules, we will be able to compel them to release right away.
Ang problema po, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, may prima facie na nga ng hoarding. So ang gusto natin mangyari dapat dito, ang problema kasi may prima facie na. Tapos, i-release mo pa ang stock.
No, Mr.
Tapos,
Speaker.
without any penalties.
Mr. Speaker, with the prima facie evidence, we can easily release the imports.
Oh, no. The stocks in the cold storage warehouse, I'm talking about the stocks in the CSW. Now, may prima facie na, din i-release mo. Ang problema, Mr. Speaker, for the past 8 months doon sa investigation, may hoarding na nangyari. Well, in fact, the record shows that by September, there is still 75,000 metric tons, and it was the data and confirmed by BPI. That was September. That's why I questioned the policy of the BPI during the time to import. Because in their data, it is only 21,000 metric tons needed every month. Now, balikan ko lang, may prima facie na tayo, tapos i-release natin. O, yun yung problema, Mr. Speaker. Kaya nga sabi ko kanina, doon sa labas, because Director Panganiban asked me to talk with regards to the issue that was raised during the last hearing in which he is absent. Sabi ko nga, may problema pa rin to, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. Kasi, sabi ko nga, may prima facie sa kanyo i-release. Ang issue dito, tinatago yung mga supplies. May price manipulation. Then, ang BPI mag-i-import. Here comes now the new guidelines, draft guidelines. Prima facie na nga, tapos sa kanyo pa i-release. O, yun yung problema. Kaya, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, I hope the BPI will review this and again go back to what we have agreed during the hearing sa Committee on Agriculture, that they have to make the schedule of release based on the available stocks of every CSW in comparison to the actual demand. Now, as of now, it is 21,000 metric tons. This does not answer the problem of hoarding. This does not answer the problem of price manipulation. And again, can I ask the good sponsor, the director of BPI, can you commit to this representation and to this august body that you will review these guidelines and consider the monthly or quarterly checking and release of the stocks in the CSW?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we commit to this. In fact, there is already a receipt of schedules for the releases so that the price will be stabilized, Mr. Speaker. So we therefore commit, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Now, again, with regards to this issue, Mr. Speaker, I would like again to reiterate that BPI should only allow to import if there is indeed problem of supply.
Definitely, Mr. Speaker. The
Kasi,
Department of
again,
Agriculture will only import when there is a need for low supply of products, Mr. Speaker.
and I hope in the next hearing, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the BPI, before the hearing, the BPI will submit again an amendment to this draft guidelines that you have sent to the Committee on Agriculture and to this representation?
Mr. Speaker, I can do better than that within this week. Upon the department circular has been operational, we will submit within this week the said requests of Congressman Paduano.
Thank you for that commitment, Mr. Sponsor. Now, let me proceed with the last. Yung issue about the importation na lang. Last na lang to, Mr. Speaker, the importation. Now, during the last hearing, that was, again, September 5, BPI was directed to issue, again, a guidelines with regards to importation, because importation guidelines is related to compulsory release of stocks in the CSWs. Now, in that hearing, BPI has committed to draft also a guidelines, and Mr. Speaker, Your Honors, the BPI committed that they will submit these two guidelines, and that includes the importation guidelines, before the budget deliberation of the agency starts in the plenary. And as of this hour, I have never, di po ako nakatanggap. And talking with Director Panganiban, sabi niya, mayroon na raw na sa cellphone. They were directed, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, to submit before the plenary. But they never dare to do it.
Mr. Speaker, my apologies and the department's apologies for not having given this right away. But we assure you that because of the integration with these two agencies, the BAI and the NMIS, we will submit as soon as possible, Mr. Speaker.
What is as soon as possible? Because
Again, this is
the
the same-
director, Mr. Speaker, the director have said na mayroon na po. Is it correct?
Mr. Speaker, with my good friend, we will submit to your office by tomorrow, Mr. Speaker.
By tomorrow.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. I will wait for that commitment once again, and I hope hindi na tayo babalik doon sa committee. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. And Mr. Speaker, again, I would just like to reiterate my support to the budget of the Department of Agriculture, especially the budget of the PCA and SRA. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Congressman Paduano. You may now
friend.
return your red tie.
Again, thank you.